I was on a small vacation over New Year's to see my two brothers and a couple good friends of mine at my hometown. To be perfectly upfront, I never liked my hometown. Moved away as soon as I was able. It was a real small, out of the way town with no cities or even neighboring towns for miles and miles. Everything was outdated and run down, and the only ones living there were people who had been there all their lives. My brothers and friends were the only reason I ever came back to visit. Usually, I'd stay at one of my brother's places for the week, but this year, both of them now had girlfriends that lived with them, so I really didn't feel like being the third wheel. The only hotel in the town was a real small family hotel right off the gravel highway. I don't think it even had a name. It was just hotel. I arrived there pretty late. The parking lot was empty except for one old truck. When I walked inside, the lobby was dim, lit by a single lamp behind the counter. An older man, 60s maybe, scruffy beard and hair grown out unevenly, stood up from a chair when he saw me. It looked like I had startled him, or that he wasn't expecting me. But after a moment, he said, "Need a room?" His voice was low and rough. He gave me a key and showed me to the room at the end of the hallway. Inside this hotel, it was very old. Not like it was falling apart, but old enough that it felt kind of dirty. The room was small too. Just a bed right in the middle with a TV in front of it. Figured it didn't matter, since I was only going to be here to sleep, and would be spending the days with my friends and family. I left everything packed and took a quick shower, then passed out on the bed. However, I woke up sometime around 3 a.m. to a soft knocking. Not at my door, at the far end of the hallway. I laid there listening to it through the thin walls. Spaced out, quiet, slow knocks. Then silence. Then a few more. It kind of sounded like an old wooden door, opening and closing, the knocks being the low thuds against the door frame. I didn't know what was going on out there, but this wasn't exactly a 5-star place, so I didn't bother caring. I fell back asleep after a while. When I got up in the morning, I went to grab coffee from the lobby before heading out, but the lobby was empty, not a coffee bar or anything. Even the front desk was empty, no sign of the old man or anyone else working there. Felt a little strange, but I shrugged it off and left to go spend the day with my brothers. I was out for a long time. I think it wasn't until 9-ish that I got back to the hotel. Once again, just that one truck was in the parking lot. When I walked in, the lobby lights were off now, and the whole place felt colder. Still no signs of the old man. I walked down the hallway and into my room, locking the door and changing into more comfortable clothes for the night. And that's when I heard it again. Those strange thud or knocking sounds. It was only a couple before it stopped and was quiet again, but this time it sounded like it was right outside of my room. I went over and cracked the door open just enough to peer into the hallway and see what was going on. Only had a second to notice the door right next to mine was slightly open now, before the man's voice called to me from down the hallway. It made me jump. He called out, asking me to come down to the lobby, and before I could respond, he walked back out of view of the hallway. He didn't say why or anything. It was super weird, but I felt like I had to go down there and see what he wanted. Maybe there was a problem with my room or something. I walked down the hallway. The place was still quiet. I knew I had to be the only one staying in this hotel right now. When I got to the end, he wasn't there. The lobby was still dark, and I didn't even hear him walking around anywhere. I got a really bad feeling standing there in the lobby. I didn't like knowing that I was alone in there, even if he likely didn't have any bad intentions. After a few seconds, I decided to just hurry back to my room. I stayed up a bit later that night, but never heard any signs of the man being inside the hotel. It's like he just left after I saw him at the end of the hallway. In the morning, I went and saw my friends and mentioned the strangeness of the hotel I was staying at. All of them were confused. They seemed to all agree that they had heard something about that hotel closing down a year or two ago. None of them were sure though, and said if I was staying there, then surely they were wrong. I spent the whole day with them, heading back late in the night. As I drove there, I couldn't help but think about the possibility that the place was actually vacant or shut down. But it just couldn't be. The lights and water in my room worked, and the old guy working there wouldn't be there to give me a room if it wasn't open. I pulled in to the same site as the previous 2 nights, an empty parking lot with just the one truck. I walked inside a little more cautiously this time. Still, the lights were mostly off, and I heard nothing at all. I started walking down to my room, and when I got up to the door, I froze. It was cracked open. I creaked the door open further. The room was dark, and honestly, I was terrified to even enter. I saw my suitcase, which was still mostly packed, and decided to quickly run in and grab it. Everything else I had left in there was worth leaving, like a toothbrush and random stuff like that I didn't care about. Definitely not enough to risk staying there any longer. I started to hurry out of there. Something in my gut told me I needed to get out of there immediately. I got down to the end of the hallway and into the dark lobby when I happened to look back at where I came from. I don't know if I'd unconsciously heard something or if I just had a feeling to. But when I looked back, I felt my whole body go numb. I saw the old man peering out from the doorway to my room, staring down at me. I ran to my car and drove to one of my brother's places. He urged me to call the police, just to get the whole story straight. Even if it was just a worker snooping around my hotel room, it was worth reporting. But what we found was a lot worse. My friends were right. That place was vacant. Not necessarily abandoned though. It was still connected to the power grid and everything, but the owners of the land shut it down and moved away, and sort of just left it there. And when the cops searched the place, they found no signs that the old man was there. Even that old truck that was there on all 3 days I was there was gone now. And actually, it seemed like the police didn't even believe me. Like they thought I was a crazy person that was using the abandoned hotel as a free place to stay, and just hallucinated the guy. They didn't say that outright, but I could just tell by the way they were talking to me. It made me feel even worse about that whole town. I stayed at my brother's place for the next few days, then gladly left town and headed back home. Absolutely the strangest, most confusing, and legitimately horrifying experience I've ever had. Thinking back on it is almost worse, knowing what I was in the middle of, and how close I probably was to never being seen again, had I not realized something was wrong and left in a hurry. I took a short vacation last Christmas to see my family over the holidays. Plan was to meet some of my family at our cabin a few hours south of the city, right in between where me and the rest of my family lived. It was just a quiet mountain cabin my parents have had for years, that we often met up at for vacations or getaways. A little wooden home with a fireplace and a view of the woods. It was always peaceful, and really that was all I wanted. This wasn't going to be some big Christmas get-together either. My family was small, just me, my parents, and my sister. But since I was driving alone, I decided to plan for 5 days. 4 to spend with my family, and 1 that I could spend there alone. I arrived 3 days before Christmas, late in the afternoon. The sky was already darkening when I parked, and the woods behind the cabin were already covered in a haze from the sun setting. I only had a couple hours before getting to bed, so I just walked through the cabin, unpacked, and took a nice long shower, then slept through the night. I think it had been over a year since the last time any of us from the family had been to the cabin, but because I had barely been there before by myself, there was no way to know if anything was really wrong with it. I figured I'd just let my parents deal with that when they got here though, and from a quick glance, nothing seemed to be off about the place. It was as nice and peaceful as I'd hoped, and the following day was my one and only full day to spend alone at the cabin, so I wanted to make it worthwhile. I got up early, made a hot cup of coffee, and took it with me on a walk around the woods. There was a rugged footpath from all the walks we'd taken over the years. It was maybe a 2-mile loop just through the trees and back to the cabin. That morning, it was fairly cold outside, and there was a thin layer of snow on the ground that had fallen overnight. The woods were very quiet. Really, all I heard was wind flowing through the trees. But I only made it half a mile in before seeing some strange scuffs in the snow right on the trail. Thought it might have been a deer or other animal, but further down, there were more clear prints, showing they were shoe prints. Very distinct, too, like they'd been made not long ago. I looked around. Nobody should have been out in these woods, especially this close onto our property. The prints seemed to follow the trail for a while, and as I continued along it, I just started getting uneasy about it, and decided to turn back. I was sure it was nothing, just a hunter walking around, or maybe someone else had a cabin near there, but I wanted to be safe and just head back. I definitely didn't want to run into anyone out there in the middle of nowhere. That was pretty much all that was on my mind the whole walk back, trying to figure out why someone was out there. Finally seeing the cabin, I walked up to the front door and almost choked on my coffee. There were shoe prints going right up to the door. It came from the other way, where the trail ended and came back around. Obviously, they weren't there before, so that means whoever was out here had been right outside the cabin just minutes ago. I frantically looked around, feeling like someone was watching me. But all I saw was an empty, snowy forest all around me. After a few seconds, the tension got too much for me to handle, and I quickly got inside and locked the door. My heart was racing. The chances of this happening was nearly zero, and on the one day that I was here alone, was even less likely. It felt like this couldn't possibly be a coincidence. And the thing is, when I left the cabin to go for a short walk, I didn't lock it. Because why the hell would I need to, for just going on a quick walk on my own property out in the middle of an isolated forest? I felt extremely uncomfortable, but I really hoped I was just overreacting. Like whoever that was just saw the trail led to a cabin, and checked through the windows if it was abandoned or something, then just left when they saw I wasn't. It was still creepy as hell though. I called my parents to let them know about what was going on, just in case. They said that maybe I should spend the night at a hotel and wait for them to get there tomorrow, just so I wasn't alone. My mom also seemed more nervous about it than I was, which is saying a lot. But I decided to stay. I was still going to be cautious, not opening the doors anymore and just staying inside for the rest of the day. Pretty bad decision looking back on it. The day dragged on. I wanted this to be a peaceful, relaxing day alone, but knowing that I might not be alone out there made it the complete opposite of relaxing. I was more paranoid than anything. I sat in the living room by the fireplace for most of the day, drinking coffee to keep me awake. Even though I was tired, I didn't want to sleep. Closing my eyes didn't feel safe, like something could happen if I didn't stay alert. Slowly, the day started coming to an end and the sun started getting lower, and eventually it was dark out again. An eerie calmness fell over the woods around the cabin. It was just the crackling fireplace lighting up the small room I was in. Even after all those hours, I was still thinking about those footprints coming up to the cabin, And as I got more and more tired, knowing I needed to sleep at some point, I was desperate for a way to somehow know if I was safe, like a sign that they were really gone. And somehow it wasn't until that moment that I thought about checking to see where the footprints led after reaching the cabin, like if they turned around and went back toward the trail, or just off into the woods, which would have been incredibly creepy. I got up and creaked open the front door. It was pitch black and silent outside. The woods out front were too ominous to look at without getting chills. I looked down at the still frozen shoe prints in the snow. Even just seeing them again gave me a really bad gut feeling. I looked for the shoe prints leading away, and kept looking, and slowly I could feel my face getting pale as I couldn't find any shoe prints leading away from the cabin. They went right up to the door, then just disappeared at the doorway. And that's when it hit me. Me leaving the cabin unlocked, and the footprints not leaving. I slowly turned around, looking into the dark, flickering orange glow inside the cabin from the fireplace. Someone was in here with me. Someone had been in there with me all day. Almost right on cue, I heard a slight creak down the hall. I leaned my body forward, enough to look down the hall toward the bedrooms. My bedroom door was open, and a man was in the middle of the hall, slowly creeping toward the living room I was in. As soon as he saw me, he froze for a moment, before bolting down the hallway at me. I took my keys off the wall and sprinted to my car, getting in and leaving immediately. By the time I felt far enough to look in the mirror, the cabin wasn't even lit up by my back headlights anymore. It was just a void of black behind me. I got into the nearest town and had police take my report and check out the cabin. Of course, the man wasn't there when the officers looked. They did find some scuffs on the floor in the bedroom though, inside the small stand-in closet. So they think he was hiding in there all day, waiting for me to go to bed and fall asleep. But what really makes it that much creepier is that's all we know. No idea who he was or what he wanted to do to me. I mean, what if it was someone I knew, that knew I'd be going to that cabin alone for a day? The coincidence of it all seems like a lot, but I really hope that's all it is, and that I'll never have to encounter that man again. I was somewhere in northern Oregon when it happened. I don't remember the exact highway. It wasn't one of the main ones, just one of those empty back roads surrounded by miles of dense forest. I'd been driving for hours, with the music low and the windows cracked to keep myself awake. This was supposed to be a pretty standard road trip, I guess, just seeing a few places, driving around, and clearing my head from all the noise. Nothing too exciting. I'd been paying relatively close attention to my gas gauge, checking every so often, and trying to fill it up when it was around a fourth of a tank. But I guess this time I pushed it too far. When the warning light came on, I figured I still had plenty of miles left to make it to the next gas station. I even checked my phone for the next station and put my directions on it, and it said 45 minutes away. Not ideal, but I thought I would still be fine. Definitely was slightly nervous though, seeing as there were no other closer options, even if I were to do a U-turn. Anyway, I kept driving, glancing down at my phone a while later and seeing it was at 35 minutes. Then I checked again maybe a few minutes later, seeing it still said 35 minutes. I remember staring at that number, wondering if it was even accurate anymore. Surely it was just an error or something. I checked another couple minutes later, and that's when I fully realized that the GPS wasn't updating at all. It was stuck at the 35-minute mark, and the little car icon wasn't moving either. I started messing with my phone, trying to reset the directions and clicking every button. But before I could get it working, my car sputtered. I felt my stomach drop. I hoped it was just a quick one-time thing from being low on fuel and not empty. Only got 30 seconds further before it sputtered again, and then again, and completely cut out. Wouldn't turn back on even in the slightest. I coasted to the shoulder of the road and sat there in silence for a minute, unable to believe the situation I knew I was in. I looked around at the place I'd ended up basically trapped at. The forest on either side of me was dark and lifeless. No lights at all, and a dense fog covering the top of the trees. It gave me chills as I sat there looking at it. I felt eerily alone. I grabbed my phone and tried to call for help, but it took me about 10 seconds to see why my GPS had gotten stuck, and now why my calls wouldn't go through. I had no service, like zero service whatsoever. I put my head in my hands for a second, realizing how screwed I was, then got out of my car. I figured if my phone GPS had been frozen at 35 minutes for a while, I could have been just 10 to 15 minutes from the gas station. I mean, I had no way to know how long it was frozen for. If I was lucky, I could walk to the gas station and make it in half an hour or something. What other choice did I have anyway? I grabbed a small flashlight from the glove compartment, then manually locked the car with my key, and started walking down the road. It was empty and quiet, but not in the peaceful way. In the I can barely see anything through the fog and pitch darkness kind of way. The forest on either side of me was so unnervingly quiet and dark. Every time I glanced over, my eyes would be looking all around at the shadows that filled the areas between the trees, making every small thing look like something I knew it wasn't. It was just my imagination filling in the darkness with shapes that weren't there. So I tried to not even look. I kept my eyes forward, looking at the endless road ahead. My flashlight was nice to have, but it barely made it 10 feet in front of me with all the fog on the road. But about 5 minutes in, I heard something. It was a few cracks of branches, definitely not wind, or just trees swaying. It was something snapping a couple of branches, either by stepping on them or I don't know. I stopped walking. The forest went dead silent. I pointed my flashlight out there and stared into the darkness. The longer I looked, though, the more uneasy I got, seeing those shapes again and knowing something could be out there looking back at me. Like if I continued to stare for too long, something would happen. So I looked away and kept walking, a little more rushed though, at least to get away from that area. A few minutes later, I noticed something on the right side of the road up ahead. At first, all I could see was a large shape laying near the trees. Thought it might have just been a fallen tree or something. But as I got closer and could get my flashlight to light it up a bit, I realized it was a car. An old beat-up sedan, halfway lodged into the forest, way past the shoulder of the road. But strangely, it didn't really look like it had crashed there. Looked more like whoever it was had driven it slowly down to the edge of the tree line, and then just left it there. The driver's side door was open slightly, and the car looked like it'd been there for a while, weeks or months even. And it was far enough off the road that unless you were walking along the secluded stretch like I was, then there was no way any cars passing by would notice it. Seeing that car lit up in my flashlight made me really disturbed. The thought that someone else had been here, maybe also run out of gas, or broken down or whatever. And whatever happened afterward clearly wasn't good if the car was still abandoned here. I didn't call out or shine my flashlight into the trees. I don't know why, but again I had this overwhelming feeling that if I looked for too long, something terrible would happen. And just when I thought that, and realized I needed to keep moving, there was another sound from the woods. A rustle in the bushes, near one of the trees behind the car, and then another. I turned instinctively toward the noise, and for a moment I thought my mind was playing tricks on me again. But no, I saw something. Not clearly, not faces or details, just figures moving between the trees. More than one, a group of people running through the forest just outside of view. My whole body went cold. I started speed walking down the road, not running. I almost had this instinctual thought that I didn't want to look like prey and show I was panicked by sprinting, but I walked faster than normal. I tried to act like I didn't hear the footsteps that started to match my pace in the forest. Multiple sets, crunching through the forest, following me along the tree line. I was genuinely too afraid to shine my light over there, or even look, scared of what I'd see. And somehow, through all of that going on, I never even heard or noticed a truck driving up behind me. Wasn't until the pickup truck stopped right next to me and a man yelled through the roll-down window that I got startled and realized he was even there. It was some regular-looking, dusty pickup truck, and the man looked maybe 50, with gray in his beard. He looked tired, but not necessarily threatening. "You stranded. What are you doing walking around out here? You're a long way from anything." I was so shaken, I just answered truthfully, saying my car ran out of gas and that I hoped I could walk to the nearest gas station. The man almost let out a short smirk, like I was crazy. "Hop in. I'll take you to the station. Think you're a lot further than you think you are." During this whole conversation, every sound and movement in the forest had stopped, and it was dead silent again. It was like everything paused for those 30 seconds. I hesitated, but decided to get in. Hitchhiking out there in the middle of nowhere was not something I ever thought I'd do, but the alternative of staying alone out there on the side of the road with whatever the hell was going on seemed worse to me. Felt like it was a risk either way. But it paid off. The old man really was just trying to help, and he seemed just as cautious as I was about the whole hitchhiking thing. He said he never offered rides, but that he lived on a farm an hour north and takes this road a lot, and had never seen someone like me wandering at night like that, and knew something could be really wrong. I didn't mention what I'd seen or heard out in the forest, not wanting to sound like an insane person. The drive to the gas station took way longer than I thought, nearly 25 minutes. Would have taken me hours to walk there, if I even made it past that forest. And when we got to the gas station, the man gave me a pat on the shoulder and wished me luck. That was it. No weirdness, no strange comments, just a guy helping someone out. I headed in and bought a gas tank, then took the clerk's advice to call the police to help me out, now that I had service. He said the sheriff's office around here was kind, and would give me a lift back to my car and make sure everything was okay. Thank God I did, because getting dropped back off at my car at night alone would have been awful. And when the cop drove me there, we found my car, except it had been moved. It was off the shoulder and on the edge of the forest, almost exactly like the other car I'd found out there. Someone, or that group, had pushed my car down there, like they didn't want anyone else to see it. That's when I told the officer everything. Anyway, that whole night became a mess. But to sum it up, the police wrote a report and did a bit of searching, but nothing came of it. No suspects, no nearby houses, and no one else had seen or heard anything. Even the other car they found had no plates on it or identifying information. There's really no saying what those people out in the forest were there for, or what they would have done if that pickup truck hadn't shown up exactly when it did.